looking back through the lens of time, there have been a series of waves of how we've understood sustainability. And that first wave was the idea that moral encouragement will happen if you just demonstrate to the populace at large the value of a passive solar house, the value of relying on solar power and wind power and so on. They will automatically be converted to that idea. And they didn't. Although moral encouragement, which really lasts from, after the Second World War up until about 1980, it increases scientific knowledge. There's a huge number of papers and books and research buildings, and it raises awareness of the issue amongst a small coterie, but it has no lasting impact whatsoever. The rest of Australia is building houses for themselves, and they're starting to build what eventually becomes the property industry, not a housing industry.
Why do you think that is? I mean,
because I think the pressures of living, trying to, as for most Australians, earn enough money to put the deposit down on the house and get a house, look after your children, raise a family, look after the grandparents when they're older, try and find a car and then a second car. All of those exigencies meant that you might believe that alternatives were good, but you didn't see that as being something that applied to you. So we had this thing called gig fee, which stands for green is good for everybody else. So the idea is that, I support green, I support sustainability, I support recycling and passive so on and so on, but it just doesn't apply to me. My needs are different. And there's a key technological thing in there as well. We were talking about passive solar as if it was an energy issue. How could you lower your energy bills? Energy bills in Australia were ridiculously cheap. Electricity was cheap with coal-fired power. We had coal. We have, we're one of the world's greatest coal mines. We also have gas, and we had natural gas and coal-based gas. So there was no way that you were going to win it on that.
Yes.
The second wave that starts is one where the government sees you've raised awareness, and you've raised awareness for politicians who suddenly start to see, well, there is an energy crisis in 1973 in the United States, which comes to Australia. And there are possibilities of the environment being destroyed. There are, people are starting to worry about the fact that the market gardens at the edges of the cities, which have provided us with such brilliant, fresh food all through the 70s and 80s, are starting to disappear. And food security becomes an issue. So we must do something about that. So the politicians start to regulate for it. Now, you have to understand the mindset of the Australian family in that rules don't always go down very well. It's a freewheeling society. The country is a Garden of Eden with these suburbs spreading out through it. And things are fairly easy. If you're told that you can't do something, there is a natural tendency in Australia to say, well, bugger you, Jack. We're going to do it. So very quickly, the idea that you could regulate to make houses more energy efficient falls on deaf ears. Australians don't take very kindly to the idea of regulation. And therefore, two things happened in parallel. One was to build a set of regulations that would control the quality of primarily suburban houses, because that's what we had. And the other one was to try and regulate that, but do it in a way in which it wasn't a clear-cut set of rules. Energy, the idea that energy would control things doesn't work. So by the early 2000s, 1/3 of Australian housing stock, which is all suburban houses mostly, doesn't have ceiling insulation. I think there's two things to understand about this. Firstly, that the government is doing more carrots than sticks. Sticks are not working, it's going to be carrots. And secondly, the housing stock is so poor, we've got so far to go. So the second wave fails, the regulation fails.
This is a pattern that is not unique to Australia, that the convergence of regulation and market-based tools like green certification or green building councils didn't provide that lift that everybody was talking about. That the business model, as it were, was somehow flawed, right?
And we've been talking about energy and materials for so long. We convinced ourselves that that's what sustainability was about. And we'd missed the fact that we were now looking at a social issue that was far more overwhelming, and the inequality. And that's paralleled in the United States and the United Kingdom. At the same time, the sustainability advocates moved to a third wave. And that is that you don't encourage people to do it. You don't say to people, you must do it, and this is the regulation. You simply disguise it by saying it's actually going to be good for you.
Right.
Do not use the word sustainable. Do not use the word green. Do not tell people that it's energy efficient or water efficient. Tell them that it's going to give them a better lifestyle.
Right.
That's an important point, because it becomes about wellness. It becomes about the occupant, not the house. And that's the dynamic change that happens in that third wave, is that you start to talk about what is occupancy rather than what the building is.